All right, now this is Westward Expansion question set one. All right, on the number one, the acquisition of an American overseas empire during the late 1890s created legal controversies concerning the A, power of the government to make and ratify peace treaties, B, the role of the president as commander in chief, C, the constitutional rights of the inhabitants of the new American territories, or D, the rights of American businesses to operate in the territories. Now, if we look at this first one here for A, power of the government to make and ratify peace treaties. Honestly, this has nothing to do with the acquisition of new land. If we've acquired new land, the treaty doesn't even come into play. So we'll go ahead and set A aside. B, role of the president as commander in chief. Again, this doesn't even really pertain to this particular question. So we can remove A and B. Let's look at C. The constitutional rights of the inhabitants of the American territories. Okay, so we're talking about the rights of the people that live there. Are they going to be American citizens? Are they not? Are they going to be able to vote? Different things like that. So that's a possibility. D, rights of American businesses to operate in the territories. Well, if to be honest with you, if we're acquiring overseas territories, that's probably the reason we're doing it. So it's between C and D, and I'd personally say C, and that is the correct answer. All right, number two now. Which of these technological developments had the greatest impact on the patterns of settlement in the West? In other words, why did people move where they moved? This one, we'll look at A, canals, B, railroads, C, telegraphs, D, steamboats. I liken this one to our modern interstate system. Most people in this country live very close to the interstates. During this particular time period, though, the interstates would actually be like the railroads. So I'm going to say it's B. Number three, we are a nation of human progress, and who will, what can, set limits to our onward march. Providence is with us, and no earthly power can. We point to the everlasting truth on the first page of our national declaration, and we proclaim to the millions of other lands that the gates of hell, the powers of aristocracy and monarchy, shall not prevail against it. All right, this quotation was taken from a journal article in 1839. With which statement would the author of the article most likely agree? So the statement's basically saying nothing's going to stop us. We're going to keep going. Okay, so let's look at A. The United States should be careful about growing too quickly. This guy doesn't seem like he's going to be careful about anything, so we'll get rid of A. B. The United States should be ruled by a monarchy. He basically said a monarchy's not going to stop us, so it's not going to be B. Remove that one. C. The United States was meant by God to expand and become great. Well, he's talking about the idea that we are, nothing's going to stop us. It's just going to happen. C might make sense. Okay, so let's look at D. The United States does not need to protect its borders. To be honest with you, this doesn't say anything about the borders, so we can probably remove D. So that leaves the only logical choice as C. On to number four. If a Louisiana merchant needed to transport a large amount of sugar to St. Louis, Missouri in 1850, which method of transportation would he most likely use? All right, 1850. We have trains, but trains are still, I don't want to say in their infancy, but they're not as effective as they are later on in the 19th century. Horseback is a very, very, I don't want to say unpractical, but very limited means of transportation. Um, the automobile hasn't even been invented yet, which basically leaves your only option is C, the steamboat. This is particularly why big towns spring up along the Mississippi River, for example. The Mississippi River was and still is a means of transporting things up and down throughout the United States. All right, number five. How did the government's policy of manifest destiny affect Native Americans living on the plains in the late 1800s? Manifest destiny was this idea that we were just going to keep expanding from ocean to ocean. Okay, so how is this going to affect Native Americans? A. Native Americans were forced to accept treaties and lands east of the Mississippi River. No, they kind of ran them off that land, so get rid of A. B. Native Americans were forced to give up reservations with the passage of the Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine has absolutely nothing to do with Native Americans, so we can get rid of B. C. Native Americans were forced to mine gold discovered by settlers. No, not really. We can get rid of that one, which only leaves D. So let's look and see what D is. Native Americans were forced onto reservations while settlers took their land. Yeah, that's what happened. We forced Native Americans onto reservations. D. Number 6. During the late 19th century, many anti imperialists worried that imperialism might threaten the United States' democratic values by. Okay, this imperialism. That's this idea that we're going to spread and keep taking over other places. Okay, and how is this going to affect our values? In other words, does this really go along with how our country was founded? So let's look here. A, by opening more doors of diplomacy. If we're taking countries over, we're not opening doors of diplomacy. B, considering the needs of the native peoples. Well, if we're taking them over, we really didn't consider their native people. C, violating fundamental human rights. What gives us the right to go over and conquer some other territory? Okay, it's probably going to be C. D, establishing the protection for weaker countries. No, we weren't worried about that. We were taking over territory from weaker countries. It is in fact B, C. All right, number 7. Why did the Homestead Act attract farmers to the frontier? A, it guaranteed farmers access to the railroad. No, it didn't. We can remove that one. B, it provided farmers with subsidies for their crops. The idea of subsidizing crops really wasn't that big at that point, so no, it's not going to be B. Let's look at C. It offered tax incentives for farmers who settled in the West. Not really. Okay. D, it offered free land to farmers who would improve it within 5 years. This was the point of the Homestead Act. They wanted people to move west. They wanted people to improve the land and settle it, and that's what it did. D. Number 8. One effect of building the Transcontinental Railroad was to A, make more land for Native Americans in the West. How in the world would making a railroad create more land? It doesn't. Remove A. It doesn't make sense. B, attract more Latin Americans to the West. They were already there. There were already lots of Latin Americans in the West, so there's no reason it didn't attract anybody for that, or didn't attract them in any way. C, make land available for cotton plantations in the West. The land in the West is a bit arid for cotton, so it doesn't really work out that way. Or D, attract more migrants to the West. In other words, bringing more people to the West. And that would be D. People moved west with the railroads. All right, number 9. The intent of the Severalty Act. I don't know why I always struggle saying that particular word. Passed by Congress in 1887 was to A, assimilate Native Americans. B, provide housing for Asian immigrants. Had nothing to do with the Asians. C, restrict immigration from Europe. Had nothing to do with the Europeans. Grant citizenship to Hispanic Americans. Nope. It's going to be A, assimilate Native Americans. That means get the Native Americans to start acting like, well, white people, for lack of a better description. All right, number 10. Treat all men alike. Give them the same laws. Give them all an even chance to live and grow. All men were made by the same great spirit chief. They are all brothers. The earth is the mother of all people, and all people should have equal rights upon it. You might as well expect all rivers to run backward as that any man who was born a free man should be contented, penned up, and denied liberty to go where he pleases. Nez Perce Chief Joseph. Washington, D.C., 1879. Based on the quote above, which governmental policies did Chief Joseph oppose? Now, based on everything he was talking about was equality. That's what he was talking about. So it wouldn't be immigration and communal property. No. B, discrimination and resettlement. Well, he talked about people being forced to live on reservations. He talked about people being treated differently. So let's hold on to B. B might be correct. C, farming and damming of rivers. He didn't say anything about that. Or D, conservation and preservation. He really wasn't worried about conservation in this regard. Okay, so it has to be B. All right, number 11. Which was the major reason people migrated to the western United States during the 19th century? I'm going to start from the bottom here. D, Industrial Revolution. Well, the Industrial Revolution mainly took place in the East, so that wouldn't make sense. C, de facto segregation. No, they didn't move west because of de facto segregation. Lots of African Americans in the South moved north, but they didn't move west. B, religious persecution. No, we weren't really persecuting any particular religious groups. I mean, maybe the Mormons could make that claim, but that's a very small group. A, economic opportunity. If you look throughout U.S. history, people move according to where they can find a job. It was no different with the whole Western expansion. Okay, people moved to the West for chances to make money. All right, number 12. How did the invention of barbed wire transform the economy of the American West in the 1870s and 1880s? The whole point of barbed wire, it allowed people to fence off large sections of land a lot easier and a lot cheaper than they previously could. Okay, so this allowed them to claim large sections of land. So let's look here. A, many factories emerged in the West to manufacture wire, creating large numbers of jobs for new immigrants. No, that's not it. B, the enclosure of the plains into farms and ranches ended the era of the great cattle drives from Texas to the railroads in Kansas and Nebraska. All right, that makes sense. It talks about enclosure. It talks about ending cattle drives. So let's hold on to B. C, cattle production declined because herds no longer had free reign over the prairies. No, people were just able to keep up with their cattle better. So it's not C. D, major meatpacking facilities moved from Chicago and Cincinnati to Abilene and Dodge City. No, they didn't. They didn't have the refrigerated railroad cars yet, and this doesn't even talk about that. So it is going to be B. All right, on to number 13. Which characteristic is most commonly Number 14. How did the concept of manifest destiny affect the relationship between the United States and Mexico? Okay. A, it inspired the defense of the Alamo. No, technically, we had nothing to do with the Alamo. The Alamo was a group of Texans who were from their own little declared country at the time. So that doesn't affect it. It discouraged the settlement in California. Actually, no, quite the opposite. Manifest Destiny encouraged settlement in California. C, it helped the United States justify the annexation of Texas. Okay, well, if we're meant to have all this land from sea to shining sea, that would be Texas too. So that makes sense. So we'll hold on to C. D, it prevented the United States from taking control of the Gulf of Mexico. Manifest Destiny would have encouraged us to take control of it. So again, it can't be D. So the answer for that one will be, in fact, C. And number 15, during the late 1800s, there was great growth in railroad service in the United States. What did Granville T. Woods invent that led to increased use of railroads in the United States? Is this a telegraph for communication between moving trains? B, a railroad chronometer to keep trains on a schedule? C, a sleeper car for passengers to travel comfortably? Or D, a railroad crossing gate to reduce accidents? I think this one was actually going to be the telegraph, and it is right. It's A. All right. And I believe that's the last question on this